Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So, welcome to the first end of month Q&A video of 2021. I hope you all had good Christmases and New Year's despite the restrictions and all the crap going on in the world at the moment. But January was actually a really big month for videos on this channel, and I've had so much feedback from you folks. So I've got all your comments here and I'm going to smash through them as quickly as I can today. So what's been going on? The 1st of January had my traditional annual big pedal board build, and I had loads of feedback from you folks on that. It was a well watched video, and I think most people took it in the manner that it was intended, which is, yes, it's ridiculous and over the top, but that's the point. So Brett and Leo says, that's a masterboard, great tones, thank you. I see that you are using 3 fuzzers at different places on the board, as the 2 gig rig loopers chained are acting as true bypass relays with all the other pedals off. In a studio context where tone goes over practicality or board management, would you connect your favourite / most used fuzz to your guitar jack, or doesn't it bother you to see the signal run through a few true bypass relays? Thanks, Leo. So a couple of things there, Leo. Firstly, yes, there are 3 fuzzers on the board, but they're in a loop together right at the start of the chain. So the signal goes through a couple of true bypass relays, but not 15 or so like the last pedal sees. But also, and most importantly, it makes no difference whatsoever. So when I was building that board, I A/B'd everything. I tried all the options, weighed everything up, and then chose either the best sounding option or what worked and made the most sense to me. So I tried plugging the guitar straight into the first fuzz pedal, going through the patch bay, through the gig rig looper, all of that. It sounded identical whatever I did. Now, not all loop switches are created equal. I think the gig rig stuff is absolutely bulletproof. It's top quality. It doesn't colour the sound at all. It doesn't buffer the signals. There's no impedance problems. It's very, dare I say it, transparent. So it made absolutely no difference. So yes, when I'm recording with fuzz, I just turn that loop on, the fuzz sound is there, and it's absolutely glorious. There is no difference whatsoever going through the gig rig looper than plugging straight in the first fuzz pedal. Now, this is when I posted a picture of the pedal board over on the gear page, and this comment really made me laugh. Taylor Gretsch replied saying, "I'm saving this photo to show to my wife every time she thinks my board is too much." Yep, fair enough on that front. See, honey, some people have worse addictions to me. Really made me smile, so thank you for posting that. It was very, very funny. Simon Bradley says, "Hi Joe, are you a pedal snob? It seems strange to me that you have expensive pedals mimicking cheaper pedals. Why not just get the cheaper originals? Personally, I use classic cheap pedals mixed with boutique but original pedals. A lot of your pedals are clones of cheaper classics just with fancier components. Seems like a sucker's game. I'm not having a go, I'm just curious." Now, I wrote a response to Simon underneath that comment, so head over to the pedal board video and read that full comment if you're interested. But I can't really deny being a pedal snob with that board, can I? Now, 2 reasons why I typically go boutique. Firstly, the people who build boutique pedals are typically people with exactly the same interests as me and exactly the same obsession with great guitar tone, which isn't the case for the more mass-produced companies. So a very good example of that is this pedal here, the Ram Fuzz from Nick Williams, which is essentially a ram's head big muff. Now, when I ordered this pedal, I was chatting with Nick over email about it, and I didn't hear from him for about a week afterwards. And I got an email saying, "I've spent 4 days auditioning transistors for your pedal to make it sound perfect, and I was nearly there. I installed the LED and it changed the sound slightly, so now I'm going back to auditioning transistors." Like, it had to be perfect. Good enough wasn't an option. Now, I could have bought the cheaper Electro Harmonix Ram's Head Big Muff reissue, but Mike Matthews wasn't going to be sat there auditioning transistors for 4 days to make that pedal sound as good as it possibly could. No, only boutique pedal companies would do that. And as you say, Simon, like, boutique pedal companies generally use the fancier new old stock components. So my Analog Man Sunface Fuzz, for example, it's a fuzz face. It's a pretty simple pedal. It's quite cheap to produce overall. But my Sunface has original 1960s germanium new market made transistors in it. So I could have gone and bought the little Dunlop mini fuzz face thing, which probably would have sounded 95% the same as the Sunface, but 2 things there. That last 5% is what people like me are chasing after, kind of the sort of minutiae of tone chasing. And I know a lot of people watching this channel feel like that too. But also, it's the kind of that attention to detail and the build quality as well. Now, most boutique pedals are built using through-hole components on a breadboard, which makes them really easy to repair if anything ever goes wrong. Printed circuit boards with surface mount components, and I'm not going to go into the surface mount versus through-hole debate today, that's for another day, but what I will say is surface mount components are very difficult to repair, and digital pedals especially, you might as well just bin them and buy a new one. It's not economic to repair them, which doesn't sit well with me. So the boutique stuff does use the fancier new old stock components with point-to-point hand wiring and things like that. And in a huge pedal board like that and a 4-amp rig, those fancy components do make a difference. And the people building the circuits and knowing how to tune them and things like that, that does make a difference as well. As I said, EHX aren't going to spend 4 days getting one pedal sounding absolutely perfect for one client, whereas someone like Nick Williams will. But the second reason is more a matter of ethics, and everybody has a different take on this. This is just my personal opinion on this. I would rather spend more and support those people who are passionate about the same things as me, rather than save money and go to a big mass-produced pedal company and essentially line the pockets of some CEO somewhere. I would rather spend more and keep Nick Williams and Janice at Jam and Simon at Kingsley and Phil at Effectro, people I know personally and I'm mates with some of them. I would rather spend more and help to keep them in business because they do great work and they have exactly the same passion for great tone as I do. If you go and buy a Behringer pedal, for example, yes, it's 30 quid compared to 200, but ultimately you're not helping the people whose work you really care about. Now, if you're the kid saving the pennies from doing his paper round and you're saving up for My First Tube Screamer, you're not going to be saving up for a 200 quid boutique version, of course you're not. And so many people just want that sound as cheaply as possible, and I totally get that. Paying a lot more for a classic circuit that you could get something that sounds broadly the same elsewhere for a lot less money sounds crazy to a lot of people. But as I said, it's just my personal take on this. I would rather support the people whose work I love. Now, you know, that's just my take. There's no right or wrong answers here. Everybody has their different preferences when it comes to which companies they choose to go with. That's just mine. So those are my two reasons why I am a pedal snob: to support the builders whose work I care about, but also for the attention to detail, the rare parts, the repairability, all that sort of stuff. Great question though. Paul Stafford Cook, I love this question too. Thanks for all the time spent putting this vid together. We all appreciate it. No worries at all. As to whether your board is excessive or not, well, whatever makes you happy, that's what's important. Personally, I just kept thinking to myself that if you gave me that guitar, a lead and just one of those amps, I could conjure up a lovely tone to rival anything on that board. But then hey, I'm very old-fashioned. Brackets, my whole YouTube channel is built around old-fashioned tones. Check out his YouTube, there are some fantastic videos on there. I just love the notion of simplicity, and all that choice is crippling in a funny sort of way. Just a thought, good vid though, watched all of it. Well, it might surprise you to hear, having watched that entire video of my ridiculous board, but I'm exactly the same. And in 98% of my playing, not so much, you know, making videos or recording studio recordings, but in my sort of daily playing, I am guitar, amp, turned up, controlling the saturation using the guitar's volume controls, and that's it. I love that simplicity too. So the reason for having such a ridiculous board is kind of twofold. Firstly, when I am doing studio recordings, it's nice to have access to a lot of different tones, and like really good tones, the signal nice and clean, everything isolated, everything powered properly, so it's all there and working, but have quick access to those tones for the kind of the inspiration factor. If I'm struggling to find a guitar part to work in a certain part of a song, hit a few buttons until something interesting happens, that kind of inspiration factor of coming up with a new guitar part. So it's great for that, but the main reason for building that board is for doing this YouTube channel and making the videos I make for the next year that much quicker. So if I'm demoing a set of pickups, for example, and I'm not sure whether I want to use a tube screamer or a clon, I've got those sounds, I can A-B them and go, that, and go. I'm not ripping the board apart, trying to find the tube screamer, then the patch lead's died and I haven't got the right power adapter. It slows everything down. So having all those sounds under my foot, sounding great, everything working, I can just hit a button and go with it. It makes my workflow for the next year so much quicker and easier. So that's why I built the board primarily. But in my daily playing, I am right there with you. I love the simplicity of amp, guitar, and just crank it all up. There's another question about that later on, but great question. I'm completely with you on that. Todd Zeno, looks like these were the JJ tubes, and this is when I compared the EL34s to the KT77s. Interesting to see comparisons to other brands or new old stock. I know that can get expensive though. So in terms of other brands, I do have a video coming out in a week or two comparing the JJ KT77s to the much more expensive General X Gold Lion reissues and comparing them side by side. Interesting results there. Little spoiler alert, it's very, very subtle again. When it comes to new old stock tubes, I think preamp tubes, yeah, I'm there with you on that one. I enjoy experimenting with new old stock preamp tubes, and I think most of my amps have NOS tubes in them, and especially with a pedal like the Effectro Tube Drive, swapping out the stock tubes for vintage tubes of different gain factors, it's a lot of fun, and I do think the new old stock tubes do sound better than the stock tubes that this pedal came with, for example. When it comes to power amp tubes, I'm not against using new old stock power amp tubes, and both my Dr. Z shipped with 6N14N tubes in there. They're basically EL84s, but new old stock Russian military tubes. And when it came time to retube those amps, I did find some more 6N14Ns and imported them from the Ukraine. And they sound great, they seem to last really well in combo amps, but also they're really cheap as well. Like, you could buy a matched quad from the Ukraine for like £15 for new old stock tubes, whereas going to a guitar shop and buying 4 matched quad JJs probably cost you about 60-70 quid. So they're really good value, they sound great and they last. But when you start getting into the £600 matched pair of UK made Mullards and things, I have experimented with new old stock power tubes before. In combo amps especially, they do seem a little bit fragile at times. They tend to, the plates start to rattle, they become quite microphonic quite quickly, in my experience. But also, if you have a power surge or something, that's your tubes gone and they're irreplaceable. Now, my Hughes and Kettner, a couple of years ago, I was swapping a speaker in it, and I managed to forget to plug the speaker back into the power amp. Turned it on, no sound. Plugged the guitar in, no sound. Turned it up, bang! Now, fortunately, all that happened was I blew the fuse in the 2 power tubes, but I just put some new ones in there. It was absolutely fine. If that had been a 600 quid set of Mullards, it would have been game over. So, yeah, preamp tubes, new old stock, can be quite fun and inexpensive, and they last a long, long time. Power amp tubes, I think, yes, they might be a couple of % better in terms of sound than the current productions, but for the money that a lot of them command, I think I'll just stick with the current productions. But yeah, great question. Monkey Magic. Not much difference, surprisingly. I just go based on cost and reliability. Yeah, there really wasn't much difference between the 34s and the 77s, was there? I think from memory, the 34s were a little bit more pushed in the mid-range. The KT77s had more lows, more highs, and were a bit more scooped, but they were pretty much identical. The tonal differences were nothing that a slight turn of your guitar's tone knob or tweak of your amp's EQ couldn't easily compensate for. So yeah, I would go on cost and reliability as well. In terms of reliability, JJs, they're kind of industry standard tubes. If I take an amp to an amp tech, it comes back with JJs in. So there's some of the cheaper tubes out there, but they seem very reliable, at least nowadays. Every company has their ups and downs in terms of reliability, but they seem great, they sound great, they seem to last a long time, and they're pretty inexpensive in the grand scheme of tubes. But yeah, you know, I think from memory the KT77s were like £6 more expensive than 34s for a matched pair. There wasn't much in it, but yeah, I'm running EL34s now in my Hughes and Kettner. Sounds great. Jason G. This is moving on to the Fane N30 speaker I demoed. I've been thinking of the spelling and pronunciation of the magnet incorrectly. I thought it was neodymium. Learn something every day. The speaker sounded great to me, thanks for the demo. I thought it was that as well for years, and it wasn't until I was putting the N30 in my amp and researching for that video I found out it was neodymium with an M, but as you say, learn something new every day. It has a really gorgeous, chunky, crisp, clean sound. I love the clean sound with the Strat and the overdriven with the Les Paul. I definitely prefer the Neo to the Alnico, and this was really interesting because this is my first time exploring a Neo speaker. I've never played one before. Well, you know, I probably have, but not knowingly. I've probably plugged into a backline amp somewhere that had a Neo in it. But this is my first time really sitting down and spending time with one. And I'd heard lots of rumours and hearsay on forums over the years about Neo speakers, that they're difficult to record, they have a weird mid-range to them, they don't sound very good. Now, I can only comment on the N30 here. I'm not sure it's indicative of every Neo speaker, because the N30 really is a top-shelf speaker. If I didn't know that it was a Neo speaker, I would have sworn blind it was an Alnico. It sounded like one, it felt like one. So I was really, really blown away by that speaker. It really impressed me and challenged a lot of my preconceptions on Neo speakers. Absolutely fantastic thing. So, moving on to the Kingsley Page. After 7 months on the waiting list and years of drooling over Simon's pedals, I finally got hold of one, and the Page is just absolutely astonishing. From the font, it kind of looks like it's supposed to be in the vein of a Chandler/Butler tube driver, but it doesn't really sound like that. It seems to be its own thing, and great sounding, interesting. Now, this gets us into the realm of what is a tube overdrive pedal, and what classes as a tube overdrive pedal, and it completely depends on the architecture of a certain pedal and the voltages used and all that sort of stuff. So all the Kingsley pedals, of the Page especially, they all run the tubes at proper high voltages, and the tubes are used to do the actual distortion and the clipping. So one side of the 12AX7 in the Page is cascaded into the next, and that is where the overdrive comes from. In the Butler tube driver, the clipping comes from an op-amp circuit, kind of like any other overdrive pedal, and then the compressed, smashed up signal is just passed through the 12AX7 on the output of the pedal for a bit of vibe and warmth, and insert buzzword here. So the tube isn't actually used to do any of the overdrive. It's all done by a solid state clipping circuit. So it really does depend on how the tube is utilised in a certain pedal. The Kingsley use the tube to do all the gain, so that's why it's so touch sensitive and dynamic. In the Butler tube driver, it doesn't do a huge amount. I tried swapping tubes in that pedal for much lower gain tubes. It sounded pretty much exactly the same. To be honest, the Butler is more like a recording studio preamp. You take your signal and just pass it through the tube for a bit of very subtle colour, whereas in the Kingsley it's fundamental to the sound of that pedal. So yeah, all the Kingsley stuff is just absolutely incredible. Running the tubes at proper voltages. A lot of pedals run tubes at starved voltages, so they're not really working like a tube should. So it's not doing a huge amount of what we would associate with a tube sound, running at a very starved voltage. The Kingsley stuff is all running at proper voltages, running the tubes, using the tubes to do the actual clipping just like an amp would. So it is an astonishing thing. If I had to choose one overdrive pedal to play for the rest of my life, it would be the Page. It is that good. Yes, an unbelievably beautiful sounding pedal. Pair it up with a minstrel and you are in sound heaven. Yeah, a lot of the Kingsley pedals are kind of designed to be stacked together, and Simon does a lot of the clean preamps cascading into the gain pedal for the kind of dumble thing, and boosting the Page can sound great. More on that in a minute. But yeah, I'll be honest, I emailed Simon last night and I got back on the waiting list for a Jester. I couldn't resist. I'm blown away by the Page, and I just want to explore more of Simon's range. So in 7 or 8 months, hopefully, there should be another Kingsley on the channel. I'm really looking forward to that. JJ Mayer, sweet sounds, better than your beloved Effectrode tube drive? Shootout time. And along the same lines, Alistair Scott says, how do you think this compares to the Effectrode Fire Bottle? Can't seem to find any comparisons, and they appear pretty similar. Well, actually, the Page isn't that similar to the Fire Bottle. The Fire Bottle is a clean tube boost, so it doesn't really create much gain on its own, but it's very good at slamming your signal harder into the front end of your amp and overdriving that. Whereas the Page, as I said, it uses the tube to actually do clipping on its own. It has the master volume, so you can gain the tube up, but back the master down so it's not destroying your preamp, and use it as an overdrive pedal, whereas the Fire Bottle is definitely more of a booster. The tube drive here has 3 tubes in it compared to the Page's 1, so it's a much higher gain pedal. But I have shot a video that will be out soon comparing the Page to both the tube drive and the Fire Bottle, using it as a clean boost and also as an overdrive, comparing it to the tube drive. And I swapped the tubes out for some much lower gain tubes so it was closer to the Page. So that video is coming very soon, but another spoiler alert, we can get them sounding very, very close. But Effectrode pedals and Kingsley pedals seem absolutely equivalent in quality. They're both 2 outstanding companies, both run by Brits, as it turns out, that Simon lives in Canada. But yeah, you can't go wrong with either company. They are both absolutely incredible. Nick Van Tinteren, sell me this guitar. No. Hope that answers your question. No, that is in response to this guitar here again, my lovely Heritage 535, which was amazing when I bought it, and then I pimped up the electronics and Monty's Paths Faber hardware. This is a lifer, I'm afraid, so yeah, I'm not going to part with this, so no, I won't sell it to you, Nick, but oh, it's such a good guitar. Blown away with it. Chance Terrell, I may be one of the crazies, but I tend to think every single thing in the guitar has an impact. The weight of tuners, capacitance of wire used, density of wood, etc. I also think caps make a difference, though if the value is saying they shouldn't. I swear I hear a difference. At the end of the day, even if it's just a placebo effect, it makes me hear it differently than it's real to me, but I genuinely play differently just knowing I'm using high quality stuff. It gives me a different feeling when playing, which makes me play differently. So even if my mental case, it all has an impact on me, therefore it's all important. Yeah, 100% agree. Two things in that. Firstly, as I said before, how using gear makes you feel is very, very important. It goes back to the whole boutique pedalboard thing. Plugging into, a really top quality boutique handmade pedal, even if for the sake of argument it sounds exactly the same as a cheaper pedal, if it gives me more inspiration factor and it brings more out of me as a player playing that posh pedal, that is absolutely reason to buy it. And the same goes for, guitars and caps and things like that. If you think, if you want a paper and oil Bumblebee in your guitar and it makes you feel better knowing it's in there and it inspires you thinking your guitar is as good as it can possibly be, that is a reason to spend the money on the Bumblebee, even if it sounds exactly the same as a 5-piece ceramic capacitor. So that is very important. But yeah, I'm completely with you in everything making a difference in a guitar, right? Now, I think this is in response to the video about whether construction and wood types and things makes a difference. I do think it depends on, should we say, the era of the guitar as well. So more modern guitars with very wax-potted ceramic pickups, for example, I think will experience this less, but especially when it comes to vintage guitars, going back to the heritage, it's a thin line, so it has a lot of air in it, a lot of acoustic qualities. The unpotted Monty's Paths, all unpotted pickups are kind of microphonic to an extent. So, the vast majority of the sound that pickup picks up will be the metal strings moving in the magnetic field, like any pickup. But being microphonic, it does pick up the acoustic sound of the guitar. So in something like this, the resonance in the kind of thin line bit to the guitar will be picked up, at least in a small part, by an unpotted microphonic pickup. So yeah, I completely agree. The whole guitar is a system, but vintage unpotted microphonic pickups, I think you'll notice more of an acoustic difference with those sorts of pickups and that sort of guitar construction, because let's face it, Gibson, I mean this is a heritage, but Gibson is still built in guitars they designed in the 50s and 60s, and in that style of guitar everything matters. In more modern guitars, if you're building a resin guitar, for example, with a ceramic pickup that's drenched in wax, I think you'll probably notice it a lot less. But in classic guitars like this, yeah, absolutely, wood, construction, pickups, electronics, everything makes a difference. The entire thing is a system. So completely agree with you on both points there, Chance Terrell. Margarita Tola. Any chance to compare past effects with CE1 option on Waza CE2? So that's the past effects chorus ensemble mini, which is so close to my original CE1, it's unbelievable. The Wazacraft is a CE2 chorus replica, but it has a switch to go into a CE1 mode. Now I don't have a Wazacraft to do that comparison, but I've heard comparisons of original CE1s to the Waza. The modulation, I think, is very close from what I can tell, but it will never sound like a CE1 because the Wazacraft doesn't have the CE1 preamp circuit in it, and that is such an integral part of that pedal's sound. It colours the overall sound of the modulation. As you dig in, it crunches up a bit, which in most pedals would be, or most modulation pedals at least, would be very undesirable. In the CE1, it's such a defining characteristic of that pedal. So the Waza will probably get pretty close to the modulation waveform and depth and things like that, but it's never going to sound like a CE1. But that might be more to your taste. If you love the sound of the modulation, but you don't want that preamp to be distorting when you hit the guitar hard, it might be more to your taste than an original or the past effects. Same goes for the Retrosonic chorus, which I think is another sort of CE1 replica, but without the preamp. So if you don't want that distortion, you might be much better off with something like the Retrosonic or the Wazacraft. So yeah, it's going to sound pretty close, but it's going to be lacking the overall colour of that preamp. So another question about the preamp here, I think. Yeah, Oscar Villarreal Chacourt. Have you used the CE1 in your board with other drive pedals? I use an overdrive before the CE1 and the boost from the overdrive makes the CE1 distort and it doesn't sound very good. Yeah, absolutely. So that preamp starts to distort when you dig into the guitar. So if you put any sort of overdrive or worse still a clean boost before it to push the signal harder into that preamp, it's going to distort more. Now, as I said, the preamp is a very key characteristic of that pedal, but it's a very unique sound. It's quite a gritty sort of like preampy, something like the Hudson Broadcast. It's a very sort of gritty, aggressive breakup. And if you're putting a clean boost into that, it's going to be very, very saturated, very clipped and sound kind of probably quite nasty, as you say. So I always run all my modulations pre-drive, but the CE1 especially, whenever I do use it on my board, always before the overdrive pedal. So you might get a little bit of that breakup, but the overdrive pedal is still doing all its sort of loveliness. You're not overloading that preamp. So great question, run it pre-drive. Bill Gaber, thanks for introducing Fuzzy Fuzz to us. Now this is the Sitek Fuzzy Fuzz, an absolutely incredible germanium fuzz face type pedal, but it works after a buffer in a way that no other fuzz I've ever played does. So you can put anything before it and it just sounds like a great fuzz face. You don't have any impedance problems running it after any sort of buffered pedal or running any effect into it. I rarely like fuzz because of what happens to the low frequencies, but this texture control really tames any over-the-top distortion. Joe, you really have a positive impact on our world. Well, thank you very much for that last bit, Bill. Very kind of you. The texture knob on this pedal is the best thing about it for me, because fuzz face pedals do have a habit of sounding quite woolly and undefined in the low end. It's why a lot of people prefer it into a cranked amp or into an overdrive pedal to kind of control that. The texture knob lets you just nip that low end to the point where it's dialed in and tight, but you can still make it really raw and flubby when you want to. It's worth its weight in gold for that texture control. Very, very impressed with this pedal and the other Sitek pedal I'll talk about in a second. And then I made a follow-up video to that demo of the Fuzzy, answering someone's question about the impedance and putting effects into it, when they said, how does it work with a wah? So I made a video with a wah pedal in this fuzz and it sounded absolutely ridiculous. To be honest, I think the fuzz sound with the SG in that little Q&A video is actually probably better than the fuzz sound I managed to get out of it in the standalone video. For some reason, the SG into my using Kettler just worked so well with this pedal. It just absolutely thundered. And John F wanted to know, is the wah placed before or after the fuzz? It was before. So it was wah into the fuzz, into the amp. And as you will have heard in that video, this pedal behaves like an overdrive. You can put anything into it and it just takes it and it just works like an overdrive or a cranked amp. It doesn't behave like a fuzz, even though it sounds like one. So if you're someone who struggles with wah placement or univibe placement, especially with a fuzz face, this might be the answer to all your prayers, because you can put your univibe into it and it will just kind of do its thing, but without sending the treble through the roof and making the gain go absolutely haywire. Very, very, very clever and great sounding pedal that. I think that Les Paul Custom would benefit from slightly hotter pickups. The Monty sound a little underpowered in it. I'm guessing it's a relatively heavy instrument. It's a bloody heavy instrument. I think it's 10 pounds 9 ounces from memory. A very heavy chunk of wood this. And the thing I've learned about PAF pickups over the years is they really need to be suited to the individual guitar. You know, for example, the Monty's PAFs are the only pickups I would want in the Heritage. They sound astonishing in that guitar. But in this guitar, yeah, I agree, they did sound a little bit anemic. It just needs that little bit more. So, you know, I was way ahead of you on this one. It now has the OX4 Hot Dwaynes in it that I demoed last month, and yeah, it is an absolute beast of an instrument now. They're not that much hotter than the Monty's, to be honest. You know, the Monty's are like 7.8 or something. These are 8.4 or 5, I think. So they're not that much hotter in terms of DC resistance, but they suit this guitar so much more. It is an absolute tone beast, this guitar now. Astonishing thing. This is Bill Gaber again. I almost passed this, but I'm so grateful that you posted this. I absolutely would have thought that this was a highly processed sound. The compression was superb, the EQ pushed the rich Les Paul mids, the noise gate was perfectly adjusted, but none of that was done with processors. Everything from the OX4s to the optimized onboard volumes and tones to a simply amazing simple amplifier and state-of-the-art speaker contributed. Every sound engineer should listen to this. Well, thank you, Bill. Really do appreciate that. that. Yeah, that was the video of this guitar with the OX4 Hot Dwaynes into my Dr. Z DB4 Fane A60 speaker, which I think is probably my favourite speaker ever, and just cranked up, and it was an astonishing sound. But I'm a firm believer, especially when I'm recording songs, that what you put into the computer should be as close as possible to what you anticipate it being as an end result. I'm not a fan of recording kind of flat, lifeless guitar parts and then doing loads of processing to them in the post mix. Now, it does depend a little bit on situation. So for me, I only ever really record my own music, and I know I'm going to be mixing it myself, so I can make those decisions knowing what I want the end result to be. So if I was recording music for another artist, for example, I probably wouldn't soak the main rhythm guitar in chorus, even though that's what I would do. They might not like that, and once it's committed to, it's there. And the same if I was sending the song to a mix engineer to mix for me, I probably wouldn't put vibrato and delay on the main guitar part, because once it's on there, you can't get rid of it. And they might want to do something very different with that. Once it's committed to, you can't change it. But when you're recording your own music and you know you're going to be mixing it yourself, I much prefer to get the sound as close as I can with guitar, pickups, pedals, amp, mic placements, and all that sort of stuff. Any effects that I can put on before it goes into the computer, I put on before it goes into the computer. And even if the end result of the sound sounds like it might need a little bit of 3K EQ'd into it, I will do that on the way in and commit to it and print it into Pro Tools. So I do as much as I possibly can up front to get the guitar sounding final. But yeah, in that video there was no processing, it was just guitar into the amp, mic'd up, going into Pro Tools, balanced out, and that was it. But very kind of you to say that every sound engineer should listen to this. I did record a full song a couple of years ago called Mr. Transistor around that whole philosophy. So the guitar parts, at least, there was no mixing done in the computer aside from balancing out the various recordings to make the song work and doing a bit of automation. There was nothing in the way of EQ or compression or delays or reverbs or anything going on. Everything on that song is exactly as it sounded in the room to me, because I wanted to kind of prove that that is possible. As I said, it will depend on circumstance and situation a little bit, but overall, I think, to be honest, it's lazy engineering to record a lifeless guitar part and leave it to someone else to sort out for you. It's much better to kind of learn it yourself and commit to these things up front, I think. That's my philosophy anyway. Now, this was a really interesting comment in a whole thread about they were asking me advice on pots and capacitors and things, but I thought this bit was really important about pickup choice. I was thinking Alnico fibre in the neck, maybe ceramic in the bridge. I'm clueless about this, but I know I want warm and thick in the bridge and something I can blend in the neck that's brighter and less bass, unless I'm getting the wrong idea about how it works. Now, a bit like I was saying about the guitar and the whole thing being a system, a pickup is an entire system. And yes, magnets do make a difference. I'm going to be looking into magnets much more shortly in PAF pickups. But the whole pickup is a system and everything makes a difference. So yes, the type of magnet will change the sound of the pickup, but I wouldn't think about it in such absolute terms, because the wind of the pickup will make a difference. The gauge of the wire used to wind the pickup will make a difference. In a humbucker, the offset in wind between the coils will make a difference. Whether it's just wound onto the bobbin or scatter wound will make a difference. The height in the guitar, the adjustment of the pole pieces, the material of the pole pieces, all of it makes a difference to how the pickup sounds in your guitar. So it's not as simple as saying Alnico 5 sounds like this, ceramic sounds like this. And a good example of that is the OX4 Hot Dwaynes. These are Alnico 5 PAFs, very traditional sound, unpotted, uncovered. They just sound incredible, but they do sound like a classic Les Paul. The bare knuckle nail bomb humbucker, like the screaming crazy output metal pickup, also uses Alnico 5s, and yet the Hot Dwaynes and the nail bomb will sound so radically different to each other because everything is a system. So the magnet is a part of it. Yes, you can fine-tune the pickup sound by changing magnets and speccing up different combinations, but everything makes a difference, and just moving your pickup up or down a couple of turns will probably make a bigger difference to the sound of that pickup in your guitar than the magnet would, or swapping to a different magnet. So try not to think about it in such absolute terms. Everything on the guitar, especially the pickup, is a system, and every little thing you can change about it will make a difference. Enrico Palazzo, again, really cool pedal. I'm a fuzz fan, but to be honest, I'm starting to appreciate distortion more and more. With that being said, I'm going to buy this one. fantastic. You will not be disappointed. This is the other Sitek pedal I was talking about, the woofy distortion. An astonishing sounding thing again. It's kind of like a greatest hits of distortion pedals. There's Proco Rat in there, there's Distortion Plus in there, there's DS1 in there, but as Enrico says, there's kind of elements of, you know, like fuzz in there as well. I can see why you like this. And there's another comment here about that. Steve Turner says, almost into Velvet Fuzz territory. It's brilliant. I take it you mean the Wampler Velvet Fuzz. I've never tried one, but I've heard lots of demos. And yeah, it really is. It does verge on that kind of fuzzy distortion thing. It's not like an aggressive bitey fuzz like an FZ1 or something, but in the same way the Big Muff is a kind of fuzz distortion, or at least how it's labelled on vintage units, it does have that kind of big woofy element in there as well. It's kind of thick and soupy, but you can dial it in, you can adjust the tone, you can scoop or boost the mids. It is so configurable. It is the only distortion pedal you will ever need. I'm hopefully demoing some more Sitek pedals soon, and I cannot wait because they make such wonderful bits of kit. Max Carlton guitar. Dude, the best tone I've heard on the channel by far. It doesn't get much better than a cranked amp and a fully dialed in guitar, does it? So going back to what I was saying earlier to Paul's comment, I think, guitar, amp, cranked up sounds brilliant. Now there's a whole video series coming in a couple of weeks about this guitar and how I've taken it from stock to a sort of late 50s spec, but the video that Max was commenting on was a demo of the OX4 Beano pickups here, which just sound astonishing as well. You know, again, OX4 pickups, just wonderful, wonderful sounding things. And yeah, the best tone on the channel so far. You know, it was very flattering. It's this guitar, to be honest. I've got guitars that don't sound that great, and it takes a lot of swapping of components and dialing things in to really make them work. This isn't one of them. This guitar is just a brilliant chunk of wood. It always sounds good, regardless of what you do with it. It's a wonderful, wonderful instrument. And on the same video, what model, year and colour is your Les Paul? This is a 1992 Gibson Les Paul Standard in Honeyburst. Now, as you'll see in that full kind of like makeover video I do, taking it from stock spec to late 50s Beano spec, the reason I bought this guitar is because growing up, and still to this day, I was obsessed with the band The Darkness. I loved them so, so much. And I was always really, really into Dan's rhythm guitar sound, and he played a Honeyburst Standard. His was a year 2000, so this is a bit older, being a 92. So I always wanted one. I got it, and for that darkness, very mid-range, heavy, barking classic rock thing, it was astonishing. I just wasn't using it very much, so I've changed it up into something that I'm going to use much more often after 2 years or so of umming and ahhing over whether I should or not. But I'm very, very glad I did. It is such a great sounding guitar, this now. And finally, Del Boy, Kushti. Can you play Man Who Sold the World? Yes, I can. So, I mean, the thing I've always loved about that song is the kind of the bass and guitar part in the sort of chorus section there. Always love that part of the song. But yes, thank you, Del Boy. I can play Man Who Sold the World. Hope that answers your question. So I think that is the end of the questions for this month. So longer video this month, but there was a lot to get through. Some very exciting things coming up in February. The next video in a few days is the Crazy Tube Circuit's Memphis Vibrato, which is modelling the Magnatone vibrato sound. Really, really great pedal. As I said earlier, comparing the Kingsley Page to the Effectrode Fire Bottle and Tube Drive. That's coming. Comparing the JJ tubes to the Genelex reissue tubes. That's coming too. There's a Q&A about the Fane and Celestion speaker comparisons. There's also a video of me struggling to play an Ibanez Gem, so that one gets messy. Definitely check that one out. But yeah, some interesting things coming in the coming month. So thank you ever so much for watching, folks. I hope some of these sort of Q&As are interesting for you. If you have any more questions you want to know from me, drop them in the comments below. Hashtag AskPerky if that... I think that helps in terms of me seeing it. I can click on that hashtag and see all the questions, and I'll try to answer that at the end of February. But for now, thanks for watching, folks. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it does make a huge difference when you do that. And I will see you in a few days for the Crazy Tube Circuit's Memphis Vibrato. Bye bye.